right. Well, welcome everybody to our live kitchen table conversation. We are back here with the Men and Masculine Folks Network. And just to throw it out there, I'm having a little bit of slow internet thing. So hopefully that won't mess with our conversation here today because it's going to be a good one, y'all. So again, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching live with us, these conversations, we are really just trying to shape and figure out new meanings of masculinity that are caring and authentic and thoughtful and many, many other things. And so with our viewers' help and the conversations we're holding here every other Thursday, we're hoping to learn a little bit more about how we as men and masculine people can show up better within our families and communities and workplaces. So this is our 62nd conversation. And a couple of updates before we dive in. We've got our very special guest here. We've got a newer face here. So a couple updates are our dear friend Serrano is no longer working at MAP. So we are very sad and we'll miss him. But he is moving on to prepare to head back home where he's from and be closer to family. And so we're very excited and joyful for him in that way. And he may pop back in here or there at the kitchen table. So that'll be a fun surprise later. And then our also dear friends, Roderick and Ed and Peng, as you may have noticed, have been here and there as their schedules have allowed. Roderick has had to step back due to his busy schedule. And so we will still probably see Ed and Peng here and there as well. So you're just never going to know who's going to be here. And that feels kind of fun to me. And then lastly, for the updates, we are very excited to welcome back to the kitchen table Dex. Very happy to share that Dex will be one of our newest regulars here at the kitchen table, and just really excited to have you join us, Dex, and to get your perspective and everything you can add here. So thanks for being with us. And lastly, yay, we are so happy to welcome our friend and fellow movement leader, Cristine Davidson, to the kitchen table. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're definitely looking forward to hearing more about your story, what you want to share with us here, and the work that you do at MIWSAC and anything else that will come up here today. But before we jump in, we'll just do a quick introduction for our regulars here. So my name is Sean Hayes, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am coming to you from Duluth, Minnesota, where it is a little cloudy. I'm hoping for some rain. I also work at Men as Peacemakers, and just really excited for today. And I'll pass it over to Felix.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Martinez. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I work for Esperanza United as an engaging men and boys program specialist. Super excited to have Dex back and also have Cristine with us. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm reporting from Eagan, Minnesota. And I'll pass it to Dex.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dex. I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and pronouns he, him, his, and that's what I got. So, Cristine.
Well, bonjour, everybody. I'll introduce myself in our traditional protocols. So, Giwa Tayashi Kindago, Nagizian Dodame, Gawapa Baganika Gishkonigan, and Donjuba. I am Giwa Tayashi. That's who the spirits know me as. I'm Eagle Clan, and I live up here in the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. I'm kind of like in the middle between Waban and Nadawash. So, and it is gorgeous here. It's nice and cool. It's a little bit cloudy. I have the screen door open so I can get the fresh air blowing in. It's so much better than that heat because I am a northern baby. I like it nice and cold. So, yeah, it's really nice to be here. I'm excited. Oh, and I should also let you know, I'm with the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition. So it's a tribal coalition based out of St. Paul, but we have staff all across the country. There's about 16 of us all across the country. I'm the education and prevention coordinator with MIWSAC. I've been there, I think, since 2007. So held many roles and worn many hats and do whatever needs to be done. You know how it goes. So yeah. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I've been looking forward to this ever since we connected and got it scheduled. So thanks again. And so that's sort of where we like to start these conversations off is, what do you do? Why do you do it? Oops, don't mute myself in the middle of the question. What is the story that you might tell or share for us about how you came to be involved with MIWSAC and maybe just talk about some of those roles.
Okay. Well, I guess the real story is that I am a survivor of long-term child sexual abuse. The man who raised me was a traditional practitioner, like, some might call it a medicine man or a spiritual leader. And so, my childhood was filled with a lot of violence and a lot of fear, a lot of chaos, a lot of division. And so, everything I do, everything I live and breathe for and think about every day is how we can restore like love and balance in my own life, in my family's life, for my community, for our people. That's what drives me is surviving those many, many years of violence. And then I enlisted in the Marine Corps. Went off to the Marine Corps for 4 years. It was the only way that I felt safe. I had to leave. I grew up in Red Lake, and that reservation is a, really beautiful, powerful place, and I miss it every day, but I had to leave in order to figure out how to live. So did that. Then I went off to Starbucks for 10 years, and I really loved doing that work because it was so, I don't know, specific. Like you knew every day what you had to do. The Marine Corps was like that as well. You knew every day what you had to get done. There was, very streamlined, very specific, no guesswork. And I really needed that kind of structure and framework in my life because of all the chaos that was kind of inside of me spiritually, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, all those things, right? And so having the physical places to kind of get that out of my body was really important at that time. And so I kind of stayed away. I never thought I would be in sexual violence work. I kind of ran from it for a while, right? But my mom is Sandy Davidson, and she's one of the founding circle keepers of the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition. So in the early years, we decided to, instead of having a board of directors, we call them circle keepers because we really wanted to maintain that circle instead of a hierarchy, right? And so Mom was like, you should come, just come. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Just come, show up at a meeting. And so, we're a membership program. And so I would just go to the meetings and just kind of hang out and listen. And that was exactly what I needed. And then eventually people would just invite me into conversations to talk about my story. And then just a little by little, people created entry points for me to come into the work. And I felt safe. I felt heard. And then, as the years went by, finally in 2007, a position came open and I applied. And it was the business and development position at first. So it was writing grants, progress reports, typing up a newsletter. I was like, yeah, I can do that, right? Like I can stay behind the scenes, not really talk to people, but do the work in a good way and help the best that I could at that time. And so from there, you kind of start finding your footing and you develop an analysis of your own and kind of learn from the people around you. Like I had really strong mentorship from the people around me. I had across all genders, questioning me, you know, piquing my curiosity about what could be different, about how we could like change the patterns that the nonprofit industrial complex provides for us. Like, how do we interrupt it? How do we change it? How do we challenge it? How do we create more entry points? And so that's kind of how it, you know, my personal story drives who I am and how I operate. And one of the things that is such a gift for me is to find that place of recognizing that even my harm doer, multiple harm doers across my lifetime, they are human beings too, with their own story and experiences. And also, they are within a social and political structure in this country. As Anishinaabe people, as you know, as Indigenous people, we have a long history with this country. And all of those things, I kind of started coming to understand that that impacted the people who cause harm in our communities. Of course, it has an impact. So there was something in me that kind of started to understand that it wasn't about me, that it was about a culture of violence. It was about, you know, I don't know what you would call it. There was a lot of factors that lead to somebody causing harm to somebody else. And so then that was like, well, how do I, what is my role in this moving forward? Like, what do I do about this? How can I still ask my community to respond differently to people who cause harm? How can I still recognize that they are, the harm doers are spirits too, that they have a spirit and a purpose that they came to this earth for, and they have their own journey to live? Like, it's like this weird recognition of all that really started driving me in the direction of, like, we could shame people, punish them, go the criminal justice route, all the ways, you know, the ways that accountability or justice or whatever looks like. But what are some ways that we can start restoring community response to it? And that's how I guess I kind of live my life now. It's like, how do we create those entry points for people to get involved, to be curious, to make room? So I guess that's where I land now, is kind of really reaching for, you know, reaching into my community to see what the interest and the readiness is, and, you know, what can I do to provide some space, or what can I do to be an anchor point? Because the other thing is that women cannot do this work alone, right? Particularly Native women, we cannot do this work alone. Our community, our whole community is impacted by sexual violence. And so where are those conversations, and how can we expand them and grow them and dig into them? So that's pretty much where I'm at now, is really trying to do more prevention work, really finding some really great male identified folk in our community to, you know, expand and grow that work that's being done. So yeah, that's really how I got into it. That's where I'm at now. It's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. I probably have a million more other things to say, right? Like, because it's like my whole heart.
I have a question for you. Obviously, you've been doing this for a while. How you take care of yourself?
Oh,
I think that's something for our people that work in this field. We focus so much in support of our community. Sometimes we forget about ourselves. We start, you know, tearing us apart little by little. But yeah, I would love to hear a little bit from you how you do that.
You know, I'm a northern girl, so anything in the woods is healing for me. Cutting wood, going out with a chainsaw and cutting some wood, going into the sugar bush and tapping maple trees, harvesting our medicines, going to the water, sewing, playing with my nieces and nephews, you know, being around baby energy, like a million different ways, right? And also having a really strong support system. So one of the things that is like so important, an important lesson for me, is that we have to fill our cup or fill our basket from many different sources. Like no one person and no one thing can meet all the needs, right? Like we're kind of taught in a Western society that, you know, you got to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and do your healing work and move on, right? And that it's an individual journey, but it's absolutely 1000% a community journey, right? Because when one of us is hurting, all of us are hurting. And so really, really growing the support system around me and having those people that I can ask questions or have those hard conversations with, that's what helps me take care of myself. And, you know, I'm a mess a lot of times, right? Like I'm on my knees crying. Like when I when I see or hear such horrific acts of violence happening around me, it's really tough, right? Like it's just tough on my spirit. And so really having those reminders and tapping into that support system and having those open conversations about like, how do we affect change? How do we not just like spin our wheels in the ruts of violence? Like, what do we got to do to affect the change? And yeah, that's how I take care of myself the most, I think. Yeah.
Cristine, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So far, everything you've talked about is, it always seems like things come in your life at a time when you need it, right? So I'm hearing you talk about how this is really hitting home is really what I want to get at with my own things that I'm dealing with in my life currently. And something that you said that was really interesting to me is how you deal with folks in community. So even with the folks who are causing the harm, and how you like holistically, how you think about taking care of that, right? Like you're just like, well, they're still people. They still have their own journey. They still need to like learn and do the other things. And rather than do the shaming and all the other things that we do as a society to treat those people, can you give me like an example, or like how do you walk side by side with someone who's caused harm in the community and still take care of the folks that they've caused harm to? Like, how do you walk through that? Can you give me an example or something on how you do that?
Oh my gosh. Whew. Well, so let me tell you, I've been through many iterations of it, of epic failure, some little bit of success. You know, I would say that I have not like been completely successful ever in dealing with a harm doer, holding space for the harm doer and holding space for the person who was harmed. It is always that question, like every day and every night is in my consciousness, like somewhere underneath my consciousness of like, how do we respond differently as a community? Because it's not just me. It's there's no way any one of us could be you know, to respond to that well, because for one, justice looks different to everybody, right? Some people think that them going to jail and going the criminal justice route is their justice, right? Some people think that if they just disappeared and went to live a different life, that's their justice, right? Like we all have a different definition of what justice is. And so to let me see if I can think of an example. So it's a little, I want to uphold confidentiality, right? And not say too much. So I just want to think carefully about it. So let's say this. So, you know, as an Anishinaabe person who, you know, was raised on the reservation, I live on the reservation now. Indian country is very small, right? Like everybody knows everybody in our communities, and I'm sure y'all are familiar with that. And so what happens is that a harm doer does not hurt everybody that they come into contact with. We know this, right? So what happens is the person who was not hurt by this person says, there's no way they would have done that. They've never hurt me. And so what I feel like I think is so important to say is that, it is not comfortable when you find out somebody has caused harm. And there's very, very, the continuum of harm is very long, but the person who experienced the harm is the one who gets to decide where they land on that. And the person who was harmed should be the one who decides what that personal responsibility looks like and feels like, what that making amends looks like and feels like, right? Like I've worked with folks who didn't want to go the criminal justice route. They wanted to sit down with a spiritual person and just tell the truth. And they wanted the person who hurt them to tell the truth in that space, right? So, they didn't want to punish them in jail, but they wanted some acknowledgement from the person who hurt them to, in front of a spiritual person, to say, this is the truth of what you did and how you impacted my life. And that was enough for them, right? So it looks different for everybody. And I think that what I want to do is just meet the needs of the survivor. Like, what do they want to do? But also continue to question how we respond to harm doers. It's so complicated. It's so simple. It's really actually so simple, but we complicate it with our sort of personal thoughts and feelings about it. Our fear of challenging people who are in power, or people who, because there's a cost. When you name somebody who has caused harm, there is a cost. And you have to, build your own support system to have with you if you're going to challenge the people who are causing harm. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm a little nervous about providing specific examples, but I have a few.
I don't need specific, you don't need to get into the nitty gritty. That was really helpful. I was just more of looking and you gave you answered my question. We'll just leave it at that. And that was beautiful. And that was super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, what I'm interested in is people who are wanting to come together in larger and larger groups to discuss what the possibilities are, rather than individuals taking on individuals. That's just not serving anybody but harm doers. It's protecting them. It's, it's certainly not helping them navigate through why they made a choice to hurt somebody in the first place. Ideally, we want to grow a group of people who can have those conversations openly and honestly to start changing it, right? Like getting at the root causes or the origin story of the person who decides to cause harm. What's their origin story? And can they dig around in that? And can men folk dig around in that with each other in their own spaces? So, because women folk, we got enough of our own origin stories and digging around in our own stuff, right? So, both need to happen at the same time, right? So I think sometimes we can get, I know I had to go through many evolutions of thinking that, that we should do it in shared spaces, or we should do them in separate spaces or whatever. And I just don't think there's a prescription for it. It has to be organic and honest, and the people committed are the ones who are going to show up and be real and have those conversations, right? Yeah, it's good stuff, but it's scary. I'm still scared, and I'm light skinned. So, I got this color skin when I show up in my community, and I acknowledge that privilege that comes with this skin color, it also has a lot of weight. It's a heavy weight to carry looking like this in my community, but I'm just here for the love, man. I'm just here for the love and the healing, and I love our people so much, and I want us to experience that good, beautiful life, right? Yeah.
Goodness, I'm really enjoying all of this and just listening in. And there's so many things that, of course, my brain and I think my heart go to, when we're talking about how do we take care of ourselves, what does healing look like for us as humans, right? But then not forgetting and really intentionally working on that larger like collective care and how do we heal um, as folks who are survivors, as folks who are the ones causing the harm, right? Like, it's, I think it's really a nuanced conversation, where the larger sort of mainstream um, group of folks might just say, all of them, just throw them into prison and, lock the door and throw the key away. And, um, it's like there's something to trying to figure out how to do it within community, because not only is that person then able to maybe grow, hold themselves accountable, like make amends, like you're sharing, but also like everyone else involved in that process, like as I've experienced within these conversations, like we're always giving more opportunities to learn and to grow, like where we are coming at too. And it was funny because, talking about self care, Felix, I love that you brought that in. I was literally just telling my good friends earlier this morning that I feel like a big old dumpster fire. And so there are those days, right? Because it is heavy and like we are all holding so much. And I think historically, I've been in this type of work for maybe around 9-ish years now. And historically, it has always just been like work, 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 work. There's so much harm, there's so much work to be done, there's so much healing needed, and really trying to find that balance has been challenging, I think, for me, but I'm just taking in a lot of what is being shared here, and I am grateful for it. And I'm also thinking about something that Sarah Curtis, who's the executive director at Menace Peacemakers, she says a lot, where she will talk about, the majority of harm doers, right? People causing harm, violent harm, sexual harm, are men and masculine people. And yet at the same time, she says, we know that most men are kind and love their families and want to be and show up in community in good ways. They just may not know how. I feel like we don't have a lot of good examples of that. Aside from this very toxic, like masculine, strong story of what we should be as masculine people. And I think that story is clearly not working for communities, So how do we work together as men and mask folks, like you said, in our own spaces, to do the work together? And then also, how can we continue to like listen and show up for the women and femme folks and non-binary people in community who I think are doing so much more of that heavy lifting? What does it look like for us to support? And I guess that's maybe my question, Cristine, for you, is like, how can men who are, maybe watching this and thinking, I'm a pretty good guy, I wanna be a good guy, what might you say to those folks who um, maybe have just kind of been living their lives a little bit ignorantly and living into that masculine privilege that we have? Um, where does it start? Like you mentioned, entry ways, and I'm very curious about what you might share about that.
Ooh, what a great question. Yeah, well, you know, I guess I believe that. So, as an Anishinaabe woman, I have a certain perspective on on what it looks like to kind of like find yourself, right? Like because of our history, we have a lot of displacement and language loss and culture loss, identity, knowing how to skin a deer or snare a rabbit, right? Like that's sort of like our ancestral practices, which is one thing, and it's real, right? That we've lost a lot of our ancestral practices. So part of for me is seeking out safe people to learn from, like building a support system of people who kind of like know our language, know our ancestral practices, because that fills us up as a human being, as a spirit. So, you know, there's a whole conversation you could have about finding safe access, for one, because a lot of times too, our cultural practices and language and medicines can be weaponized because we've had so much, you know, assimilation and genocidal policies enacted. So when we're trying to seek that out, it can be weaponized. But really, like, what I'm working towards is like safe access to learn about those things. And so when they can get safe access and learn about those things, they are stronger. They're building a support network with one another. And I think that leads to a stronger sense of self. Just our spirit is stronger when we know who we are, right? Even if we can only say, you know, buju and miigwech or count to 5, whatever it is, the spirits are hearing us trying to use our language, right? So it's really the actions that we can take in our lives can move us closer to like our spiritual purpose, like the purpose of our spirit to be on this earth. The closer we can move to that, every step we can take in that direction will strengthen us as a people. You'll be stronger individually, but we'll be stronger as a people. And so I think that's what I would ask is, you know, do your homework, I guess. Figure out what matters to you. Be courageous. Also, you know, find your voice in terms of when to step in and when to step back, right? Like, it's really particularly important to step forward when you're in male spaces or masculine spaces. Like, we really need y'all to do that because, you know, we're still living in a society where a woman's voice doesn't matter. And they'll be like, right? And not in all spaces, but I would say generally that is still how it is. And so women just become their right? And so anytime menfolk can like be real with each other, I think that's what I would really love to see happen. It's just a fable or a myth that y'all can't communicate with one another. That's ridiculous. Of course you can, right? And it's powerful when you do, to be present for one another, to look each other in the eyes and really see each other. Like, that's not a myth. That really happens, and it's powerful. And you're changed from it when you have an encounter like that. And so if you could have a community of people who really see each other, I think that's really moving in the right direction. I would also add too that for me, I feel like we miss the step of identifying that it's systemic, that oppression and racism and white supremacy and homophobia and all the things are systemic, right? It's not about an individual. It is totally by design that we are like this, right, as a people. And so the more we can put that out there and share that information so people can become educated on the, you know, the legislation and policies that have been put into place to keep us in our place, you know, like, I think that we will just continue to grow and heal after that. It's not an individual's problem, right? It's systemic. So, I mean, it's individual in the sense that you can take personal responsibility to do your learning, you know, but that's a big piece of it for me is how systemic it is. So interrupt it, challenge it, be brave, you know, understand that, like, you know, Sean, what you were just talking about, you know, I call it the web of life, right? Like, some of our most powerful healing is when we understand that we're all on the web of life, and when one thread of the web is pulled, the whole web moves, right? So if one person is causing harm, or one person is remaining silent, or one person is being absent, or one person is shaking everything up, right? We're all going to feel it. So yeah, like, be proud and be present on your place in the web of life, right? Because we need you. We need every single one of us. We're needed. Yeah.
Yes, be a good parent, be a good role model. It make a difference. And for those individuals that maybe they're listening to this kitchen table conversation for first time, and they know maybe someone that experienced violence or going through difficult times, Cristine, what will be that? What will you tell them? You know, how we can support those individuals that are going through a difficult time right now, that are experimental sexual violence and maybe don't know what to say. What will be that message that you can give it to them so they could be better friends, better brothers, better, first responders? What would be that recommendation?
Actually, thank you for asking that, Felix. I think actually another thing I would add to that is that we can never make the assumption that the men and masculine identified folks in our lives are not experiencing violence themselves. And so, what I would say about that is that there are a lot of resources, like programmatic resources, like advocacy and law enforcement and all the things. There's like the I don't know, the sort of systemic route that you could take. You could report it to the police. You could report it to an advocate. Advocates are somebody who stand outside of the systems that are going to stand in bias support of you as somebody who is experiencing violence. So, a good advocate is going to check in with you to see what direction you want to go. Because not all of us want to report to the police. Not all of us want to tell anybody. Sometimes they just want to sit in a room with somebody who's not going to hurt them. Sometimes they want to say something and tell somebody out loud, right? Sometimes they want to see what resources are available. So, I suggest finding a good sexual assault advocate. They're pretty amazing, right? Because we all have different needs and directions that we want to go. So somebody who, and if it's not a good fit, make sure you just stop going to that person and find somebody else, right? I remember when I was coming out of my violence, I was angry, right? I was real angry. My body and my soul were angry. And so my mom suggested going to see an anger management therapist. And I thought, okay, this is a good idea because I was really broken. I was, having thoughts of hurting myself and probably just making bad choices, all the things. And, that anger management therapist told me to hit a pillow with a tennis racket. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I want to blow up the world. I want to dismantle everything. And you want me to hit a pillow with a tennis racket? It was just culturally and just way off. That person was not listening to me to see what I needed. They were not checking with me. They had their own idea about what to do, right? And so an advocate will be somebody who will check in with you to understand you and what you need to kind of heal and navigate through it. So that's what I suggest. Find an advocate, do some reading. And then in terms of somebody who is not being victimized themselves, but want to support somebody who's being victimized, really, I just will say it 1,000 times over that let them take the lead, follow their lead, ask questions. And sometimes as a victim, we don't even know where we want to go or what is possible. So sometimes we need a couple suggestions or just somebody to be there, be present and solid, right? That's a big thing. If they do want to go the criminal justice route and report it, again, that sexual assault advocate would be really helpful to kind of navigate, going to do the forensic exam or reporting to the police, that kind of route. So that's kind of what I would say about that. And believe them. Believe them. Don't say, oh, I don't think that person would ever do that. Or, maybe you gave mixed messages or something, all the things that we hear that get said. Just believe them for sure.
Thank you, Cristine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I do want to bring in, we're getting some comments, folks who are listening in, and from Sarah here, just wanting to be heard. And I think I heard you say that, Christine, just that there are so many ways that it can look for folks who have experienced that violence, right? And um, and I think about like the degrees of violence, right? Like just as a trans person experiencing transphobia and microaggressions all day long, that's a form of violence, right? And then it goes all the way up to these more severe, like physical, sexual violence. And I think, when I think of the folks that I've spoken to in the past who have shared those stories of harm and pain, most of the time they haven't felt safe talking to police or criminal justice folks. They really just wanted someone to sit with them, next to them, and just listen and just offer that care. I think just by whether you're sitting next to each other by the lake and sharing these stories, or texting with someone, just the fact that someone that we all, right, we all care and have the ability to like show up for our people, and really like what you're saying about centering what it is for them, and maybe just asking some of those curious questions, like here are some things, which of these, or are there multiple options here that sound good to you, and then I'm also just thinking about, like I am not a sexual violence advocate, right? I don't know all of those things. And so someone who connects with me, I think about your web analogy, which is really beautiful. Then it's like I connect to another thread, a person there who knows and who can connect to deeper care and deeper support. And so I guess I don't really have a specific question here, but I'm just thinking about there's really no wrong way to support folks unless we're sort of pushing in a way that doesn't feel good or helpful to them, maybe.
Yeah, and not victim blaming, right? So no victim blaming, no saying you should, right? Like those are a couple of like just standard rules, right? And just really standing in bias support of whatever it is that they're saying they need. Because maybe they want to go to school, maybe they want to quit their job. I mean, you never know. Like we're all individuals and we're all experts in our own lives. So, sometimes we just might need just somebody to navigate the thoughts, because of course too, when you've experienced violence, sometimes it's acute, like happening, like it just happened today, or it's, in my case, many years and many instances, right? So our journey can look all different kinds of ways. There's no one way. And so just, yeah, making sure that they know that they're not sick or crazy or don't have capacity. They're just trying to navigate a really chaotic experience or sets of experiences. And can we slow it all down enough and take the time to really be present? And I think that could be said for everybody. We could all use a little bit of that, right? In many different arenas of our lives. So, yeah.
Can you share any best practices in your field? Obviously, you've been working for quite some time, but for those individuals out there, any best practices that have been helpful to you in your field, and it can help others to do a better job, to be better first responders, better practitioners?
Well, I don't know if I have any best practices about being a first responder. I'm not a first responder necessarily, right? Like we are a tribal coalition who works with advocates like across the state and across the country. I do think that some things that I believe to be true, that have proven themselves to be true in my life, are that since 2000, what is that, 16, 17 years since 2007, we've gotten different grants and stuff like that to do work with menfolk in the Native community. And we've had varying degrees of successes and failures throughout that work. But one thing I know to be true is that the space has to be created, and I don't know how else to say it, but like I can't form the work. I can't dictate what the work will be. Like menfolk have to do that for themselves. And so we have to make space for that. So we have to check our own sort of, I don't know, ways that we do things, and to leave room for how it will evolve for menfolk. For me, working with Native men, right? Like leaving room for Native men to self-identify what will work for them to work with each other, right? And so for us, we can't just sit in a room with a textbook and, that's just not going to work for us. Like we got to get our hands dirty. We got to get sweaty. We got to, got to laugh. We definitely have to have food. I mean, these are just like really kind of some basic things, but what does it look like to dedicate resources for menfolk to have the space to do the work? And this is just because I'm in this particular environment, right? So, I mean, I have my own personal life and my ceremonial space with a different kind of work that's kind of similar. And then I have our work as a coalition, and what does that look like? And so a lot of times they blend together, and I have a hard time separating them because it's all our community. But, in terms of, just challenging us to think about how to respond as a community is a big best practice. Like and we don't have the answers because there's just, it's a lot. But seeking and working towards that is definitely, I think, a best practice, and not an individual thing, but a group and a community thing is really. So like right now, we received some funding through the Minnesota Department of Health to create like a sexual violence prevention toolkit. So we got a group of guys together, and so we're on our second, we're going to do 3 more pilots of the toolkit. And so it's just we don't know what else to call it. It's not a curriculum. It's not a workbook. It's just kind of a toolkit. So, I got my sewing room back here has all the supplies. So we got, a drill and a toolbox and a set of tools, and we're building things, right? Like building a dog house or building a bird house, or because part of it is like making the analogies between like building a strong foundation, working as a team, amplifying somebody's strengths. And if they have some weaknesses in particular areas, who can coach them in because they have a more knowledge or a stronger skill set around something. So like, that's what I think our best practices to me in my mind is exploring what that looks like and feels like. And women do it in women's space. So I'm just trying to create the resources for the menfolk to do it in their space. I don't know. Does that make sense? Because we have access to resources that I think that men in my community and the Native community, they don't have access to. We have a lot of direct services type programs that will like help you get a job or help you go to school or help you get sober or, these different kinds of things. But there's not a lot of resources for men who want to transform community and look at what it looks like to kind of restore our identity and our cultural practices. Like, what does that look like to all come together? So if MIWSAC can have a tiny role in creating some of that space and providing some anchor points, I'm here for it. I'm just here for it. Yeah.
I wanted to comment to that, Cristine. Yeah, I hear you a lot with that. Something I've noticed in men's spaces or just with men in general, or shall I say how society has put onto men is that what I've noticed is that they've been pigeonholed in this way of like, you take direction and like I tell you what to do and you do the checklist and then that's it. And so to have this fluid, open space where folks can just like have their ideas and flow with them are different. In my experience, being an AFAB person, so in other words, assigned female at birth but a trans man, having the experience of both sides of the coin, which is really an advantage. Like you said, there's lots of services for women, and then there's not necessarily a lot of services for men per se. And so to change the way of thinking of like, for men to come to a space and be like, oh, so I get to come up with the ideas, like I'm not being directed, and the idea of them taking initiative is a big thing, and it's not necessarily something that's given a lot and not something that's encouraged a lot, and also is not familiar. And so I think that there's that struggle, and that's what you're finding. And also what I want to say to the men in this conversation is that part of the issue I see in general is that men are so used to taking direction, and that takes a lot of energy from femme and women folks. And so one of the things I think that men need to do is to take initiative and not ask for direction and not ask for femme folks to do that unpaid labor all the time. Because even as us asking, like, what can I do? That's also laboring you. And I think men folks need to step into spaces, listen, step back, and be like, okay, what can I do? What do I feel in my heart? How can I make a difference? How can I contribute? And knowing my spiritual path and what my strengths, how can I contribute through my strengths? And that is really a big thing for me, where I say, I'm just like, let's stop laboring these women folks, femme folks, by even asking the questions. Just be in the space, step back, like you're saying, knowing when to step in and step back, and take initiative. And I think that's a big thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's exactly it. And, you know, we get it that there's a lot of social conditioning that shuts people down, right? We're taught in school, you got to raise your hand, you know, like literally we are taught from birth how to comply. And so what we're asking to decolonize, or whatever the terminology might be, but to break through some of that mindset about what it means to be in the circle together, right? Like, not the hierarchy, but what does the circle look like, right? Where every gift is valued, every person, every spirit is that value is there, right? And we have to model it. We got to struggle through it. We got to get it wrong a few times, and we got to keep showing up. Like, even if it just like fails or messes up, or just keep showing up, keep trying. Yeah. Good stuff.
Ooh, this is some good stuff, and I hate to even be the one to say, hey, we're running out of time, because I've just really enjoyed this and just learning so much. And I think, you know, Dex, to your points there, and Cristine as well, like, you know, it's one thing that it is true that there are not as many services for men and masculine people. That is true. And also, it is also true that we hold very much a lot of privilege just waking up every day and having sort of the people around us take care of us and do that work, and that expectation, you know, that women and femme and non-binary people will just always be there to do that role. And as someone who has done a little bit more of that sort of planning and event planning and organizing a community, it's a lot. It's a lot even with a team of folks. And so I guess I'm sharing some gratitude, you know, what little I can in this moment, right, for all of the women and femme folks in our communities who really, I think, you know, are the anchor, as you mentioned. And men and mask folks are completely capable to step forward and to start saying, hey, let's meet up once a month and just check in with each other. Like, there's not a whole lot of planning that has to go into that. Let's grab a beer and just tell me how your life is right now. How's your marriage? How's work? Like, beyond the sports and fishing and things that we sort of get stuck on. I think as masculine people, yeah, I just think there's so much possibility when men and mask folks sort of have that light bulb moment where we see the privilege that we occupy, and we can start to take these baby steps towards either using that privilege on behalf of and centering and lifting up the other folks in community, or like just giving it up altogether in just the little ways in our everyday lives. So I know we've only got a couple minutes left here, but we always sort of like to end with, is there anything else that folks want to share? Any final thoughts as we wrap this one up?
Thank you, Christine, for being here, and MIWSAC for the amazing job that you guys are doing with the community. And yeah, thank you for being here. I'm super excited. It was a very fun conversation. I think we need another hour. There's probably more questions, but thank you for being here. Thank you for being present. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and for taking time of your busy schedule to be with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just send out an invitation, open invitation to reach out to me, man. Like, reach out. Like, I am down with however creative way that we want to dig in to involve the community, or, if you're interested in just kind of seeing how MIWSAC rolls or how the men folk in my community roll, like, reach out and we'll connect y'all up, expand that circle, right? Like, that's really great to do. So really an honor to be with you all, and thank you for inviting me. Miigwech.
I just want to say thanks, Christine, for willing to go deep and answer in your own way those questions. I generally like to get in deep, and I appreciate you being like perfectly fine with that. And I really appreciated and enjoyed your point of view, and it was very helpful to me personally. And it just this was a very important conversation for me to be a part of today, and I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely sharing lots of gratitude, Christine. Thank you so much for sharing your time and those parts of your story with us. And it's just it's a big gift for anyone who is listening and watching right now, or if they're watching after the fact. So thank you very much. And thank you to, again, all of you who have been able to tune in. Yes, everybody who's watched or watching later, we appreciate you. You are part of our community, and we love to hear from you. Thanks to those who commented today as we were live and shared your thoughts. And as always, we want to say thank you to our funding partners, who are Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota and the Novo Foundation. We are grateful for their support and partnership to continue being able to hold these conversations where we're learning and growing a lot together. And hopefully you are too. So, as a reminder, for those who don't know, we're holding these kitchen table conversations live every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, live on our Facebook page, and then we upload them to YouTube later, so you can find them both places. And we're excited to have another special guest joining us next time, and that will be on Thursday, July 27th at 12 p.m. Very excited about that special guest, so you'll hear more soon. So don't forget, like our Facebook page, find us on YouTube and follow us there. We really love to connect with all of you, and you can find all of our previous conversations on our Facebook and YouTube page as well. So thank you again to all of my kitchen table associates, friends, community. I really deeply appreciate all of you. And back at you, community, and we will see you again in another 2 weeks.
Peace.